We're in session 14 of our course, Come to Papa, encountering the Father who heals our deepest pain. And in our sessions this week, we're talking about the embracing Father, the Father who welcomes his lost son back, the prodigal son, and who also welcomes the older son back into his presence, into his arms, the older son who has been separated for a different reason than the younger son. We're in Luke chapter 15 this week and talking about the parable that is known as the parable of the prodigal son. Really, that term prodigal means lavish and extravagant, and it's initially talking about the wasted life of this younger son as he wasted his inheritance in wild living. But I believe that the real prodigal in this story is the father. It's his lavish, unrestrained mercy and grace that welcomes his son back and restores him without even any kind of seeming accountability. We're going to talk about that in the next session tomorrow. But the reality for this session is that Jesus is talking to two groups of people here in this parable, in this series of parables in Luke 15. He's talking to the tax collectors and sinners that are gathered around to hear him, perhaps in a party at Matthew's house. And he's talking also to the scribes and the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, that I can picture kind of scattered around the perimeter of the courtyard, listening to Jesus teach. They're offended, they're scandalized that this one who is a rabbi, this one who claims to have intimacy with God, would actually associate with these people who were so far from God, these unclean ones, these tax collectors and sinners. Remember, in that kind of celebration where they were eating together and enjoying fellowship together, it was a covenant act. It wasn't just a casual, let's meet for lunch and have some and talk about some things, but this was when a person like Jesus, a rabbi, a teacher, would sit among broken people. He was in effect saying to them, I am one with you. We are sharing the same life resource right now, as they would eat together and drink together. And he was saying, I've really come to identify with you, to embrace you and be one with you. And as I shared last week in the sessions, that the amazing reality of Jesus' encounter with these broken people is that real broken people were comfortable in the presence of the Holy Son of God. That really speaks to us as believers in this day, as leaders in this day, that the ones who were uncomfortable with Jesus were the religious, spiritual people. But the ones who were comfortable around him were the ones that were broken and weary and tossed. He was identifying with them without ever becoming contaminated by their sin. He embraced them as his long-lost friends and even brothers and sisters. And so in this session, we want to talk about the older brother. You know, the younger brother had gone away from the father's house to spend his life wildly. He thought he had to go away from the father's presence in order to have a good time, in order to celebrate. And he had done so. And he was surprised when he came home that the father threw a great celebration of rejoicing. This father, this papa, is a party animal. He loves to celebrate the lost that has been found. But here's the older brother, and he's lost in a different place. He's lost in the far country of his own mind. He's lost in the far country of his imagination, that he has to work separate from the Father's presence. And we realize that in the story that's recorded in Luke chapter 15. So let me just read that passage for you. In Luke chapter 15, verses 25 and following. The older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. But he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, Look, these many years I've been serving you. I've never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I may make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, You killed the fatted calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found." There are such pointed and wonderful things that are emphasized in this short account of Jesus dealing with the older son. First thing that comes to my mind is this older son, although he was still connected to the Father's house. Remember, Jesus is speaking now to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Although they were still connected to the Father's house, they had no relationship with the Father. They had taken on a slave mentality that was focused on their future inheritance rather than on present relationship, in which they had everything that was the Father's. That's the point that was so missing. They were focused on what they would inherit in the future, not realizing that in the place of intimate communion with the Father, they had the fullness of His provision available to them at any time. And so this slave mentality, I have served you, the word really is, I've been your slave these many years. And that's what happens to us if we work for God without relationship with God. If we are His slaves, His servants, with no intimacy. You see, God never intended us to work for Him. He intended us to be in partnership with Him, in intimate communion with Him, even as Jesus was. We're going to talk more about that in the next session, how Jesus came to model perfect servanthood in intimacy with the Father, the marriage of servanthood and sonship. But the older son was far away, in the imaginations, in the far country of his own mind, slaving for the Father, but not enjoying the Father, working for Him, but not enjoying the benefits of being in the Father's house. And so when he hears the celebration, he hears the music and dancing, and there's no dance in this guy's life. There's no celebration in this guy. He is a grumpy, old guy that just, it's foolishness. Don't give in to such foolishness, that celebration, that craziness, all that laughter and all that messing around in the Holy Spirit and all of that. That's just not for me. He's grumpy about it, and he's slaving for the Father and not happy. So he hears all this celebration. He comes to find out what's going on, and a servant meets him, and I like to think that maybe this was one of the older brother's main servant guys, and he's all excited because he knows the Father's heart. He's been in on the celebration and the excitement of having the younger brother home. And I can imagine the conversation. The older brother says, "What's going on in there?" And the servant says, "Whoa, man, your brother's home, and we're celebrating." And he sees the dark reaction on the older brother's face, and the servant says, "And we killed the fatted calf for him, and we're gonna have a big barbecue and a celebration." And the older brother is not happy about this. I grew up in farming communities where 4-H was a big deal, where high school students would raise animals and all that kind of thing. I kind of picture this older brother saying, "That fatted calf was my 4-H project. I raised that calf. That calf belonged to me." And he's not happy about this celebration. And so he is angry and refuses to go in, even though the door is open to him. So what does the Father do? Here's the heart of Papa. He doesn't just say, "Well, that old grump out there, he can just be on his own. I'm going to have a party." No, the Father leaves the celebration and goes to the older brother just like he went to the younger brother. He runs after the older one just as he runs after the younger one. Just as he went out after the lost sheep, now he comes after the shepherds that have not done their job well. And the Father comes out to the old son and he says, "Son, come in. I want you to come in." And the older brother is angry, and he says, "How can I come in? This son has wasted your living with prostitutes." It's interesting. There's no mention of prostitutes in the story until that moment. I wonder where he got his information. I wonder whether he was fantasizing in his own mind about the freedom of the younger son and making stuff up, even as he was celebrating his own faithfulness to the Father's place in the Father's agenda. It was really his own agenda. It was really his own heart seeking after his own inheritance in the future. And the Father said, son, we have to celebrate. This is your brother. Notice when the brother says, I'm not going in, this son of yours. And he separates himself from the prodigal son, from the younger son. But the father won't stand for it. He says, no, this brother of yours was lost and is found. We had to celebrate. Come in. And the father's heart goes out to the older brother just as much as to the younger brother. And he brings the two together. He says, the one who had to leave the father's house to celebrate and the one who left the father's presence to work, those two are brothers, and they need to come together in the father's heart, in the father's presence. And so I want us to consider a couple of things. What would have happened to the younger brother if he had encountered the older brother before he got to the father? Before the father, maybe one of the reasons the father ran to meet him was so that the younger brother wouldn't meet the older brother first. He would have never gotten to the father had he run into the older brother first. And my heart is grateful that in this story the father encounters both of them and says, come together, come in, come be with me, and let my heart be that which heals you both. Here's an observation. Younger brothers tend to become older brothers the longer we are in the house. We tend to get used to the routine, and the intimacy that drew us in the first place can wane, and we can find ourselves, even in our heart of servanthood, growing further and further away from the Father's presence. And the further away from the Father's heart we go, the further away from Papa we wander, the harder our heart becomes, the more judgmental and the more critical we become. My prayer is that we'll stay connected to the Father, that his heart will be ours, both for the younger sons and the older ones, and that we will find ourselves coming together in the knowledge of the Father's love. God bless you as you think about these things.